Hey guys, this is Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. Today's video is probably the one video that makes people the most upset. I can almost guarantee it. I know you're thinking, no way it can match the David Vizard one. This one's for sure probably going to beat it, without a doubt. So the premise for this video is, I have had a small block Chevy dyno mule built. Just use it for testing. And I'll be showing the dyno graphs in this video, but you can look back at several of the other testing in the other videos. I also have now had a LS 408 engine built as well to use for dyno testing. And we can compare the two numbers, and that's what this video is about. That single-handedly probably is going to make people the most upset, because when you compare a small block Chevy to an LS, for some odd reason, LS fanboys go nuts. So I can't wait for that. The one big theme that I'm trying to get out of this video is, do not be a parrot. A parrot is someone who repeats stuff that they heard but have never tested it, never witnessed it getting tested. They're just repeating crap that they heard on the internet. And usually it is crap. And during this video, I'm gonna go through some of the things that get parroted that are for sure wrong. Because for sure, 4 things I have heard and now have tested several times, they are false and garbage. So we're going to go through that as well. Now, I want you to understand before I begin any of this, don't take my word either. I am one guy, all right? I am not a guru. I'm not a god. I'm pretty good at what I do, but I'm just a man. I make mistakes as well. This dyno testing that I show you, you should use as information. Go gather information from other sources too, and then compare them. But one thing I do want you to know is, those 2 engines that I'm describing getting built, the small block Chevy and the LS, those majority came from my pocket. No one paid me to build those. Now, some vendors did give parts, but I gave them absolutely no preferential treatment. And I say that because I told them that too. A lot of the testing you see is not that way. They're biased to something that they're trying to sell, or in some way have a contract with those different companies. I don't. So anything that you see here, it's straight up front as possible. Now you might say, well, aren't you trying to sell stuff? I do. I sell ported heads and stuff, but both for LS and small block Chevy. So there's no dog in the bag on which one I sell more of. It doesn't matter to me. So in saying all that, I want to start with our very first thing that gets parroted, and it's not even about the small block Chevy or LS guys. It actually comes from the Ford guys. Because every time I mention an LS video with an LS head, do you know what the first thing that gets parroted is? It's not even from the LS or Chevy or anybody. It's from the Ford guys. The Ford's guys' first thing, and you've probably heard this parroted over and over, of course the LS is good. They copied a Ford. Let's get to that, shall we? This is a small block Ford head. This is an LS head. If they copied, their engineers are idiots. Because look at that port shape. Look at the first, this is the cathedral one. So this is the first one that Chevy did. They don't look at all alike. Here's another news flash. This is 20 degree on a small block Ford. And when they first came out from the Chevrolet, they were 15 degrees. Some crappy copying design. But that's not even the other thing either. Because you're like, well, wait a minute. The LS3 square, copied. And we'll get to that. Let's just do this. Watch this. Let's see where the intake and exhaust valves are. The heads are laying the same way. This is the LS intake valve. We should have an intake valve here. We have an exhaust. They did not copy. Stop saying that. You sound ridiculous. If you're talking about the LS3 head, no. So then you also copied a raised runner port? No. Here's the thing to also remember from this. If you're talking about, well, the layout like this, that's copied from Ford. You do know that Chevy is owned by GM, and GM also had another engine companies that worked all together with them. So for instance, they had Pontiac, GMC back when they made their engines way back. Also Oldsmobile. And Oldsmobile had this layout. And so did several of the others. Now, I'm not a engine history guy, but I know Ford wasn't the only one doing this. So Oldsmobile for sure was. Who did it first? Don't know. But you can't say it copied if one of the rest did it. So let's first thing parroted. Let's just get that out of the way so the Ford guys can get really upset. By the way, Ford guys, please don't stop following me for doing this. I'm just trying to make you sound not ridiculous. If I have money, the next engine that's going to be built, that's going to be a mule to actually do testing, will be a Ford. Because I am very curious to see the differences between the power outputs of these two. Because the layout for the manifold is similar as far as that goes, but not the way they enter the cylinders. at all. By the way, your layout here, if you were going to claim that you copied, you might try saying that the LT copied, because the LT layout's like this, where you have the intake here and not the exhaust. Anyway, let's go on to actual stuff now. Before I show you the specs of my engine, I thought I'd give you a reason why I have said for a long time I don't think LSs are superior to small block Chevy. It started from this, so I had actually done my research first. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm going to show you my dyno stuff, but I want to show you this one because, well, I think most of you forgot this because this took place in January of 2007. So this is from Chevrolet High Performance. It was a magazine. That magazine's now defunct. This article was old school meets new school. Essentially what it did was, let's take a small block Chevy and let's build a LS and make them about the same. Let's see how they do. And that's what they did. And guess what? It wasn't superior. So let's look at some of the specs and then I'll actually show you my engine. We'll see if it kind of tracks. So on the small block Chevy, you know, this is one of the things that gets parroted. There's a huge difference between the LS and the small block Chevy. The LSs never came in a 400 cubic inch engine. Your 6 liter is not a 408. It's not. So like the 408 that I'm gonna show you for my stuff, it's never came that way from the factory. So right away, I give it a benefit that it did not have from the factory. In this article, they used the stock 400 block. It's a 2-bolt main. So the thing that gets parroted is, stock Chevy blocks can't take the power. Can they now? That's parroted and that's not always true. Side note, complete side note. I actually dynoed yesterday at Dunsworth again to try a different camshaft on this LS. You have to wait a long time to see that video unless you're a channel member and you get to already know the results from that. But anyway, I was talking to Gary and we're going to try to build a small block Chevy 2-bolt main 350. And we're going to try to blow it up and see what fails first, if it is actually the block. And yeah, we're going to put turbos or either that or the supercharger to it and see when it actually fails. Because you know they say they're so weak. We'll see. But anyway, that's a stock 400 block. Don't pair it. Those things are junk. They're not as strong as LS. They may not be as strong, but they make them the same power with them. So what they did is they used a set of 225 CNC ported heads, hydraulic roller camshaft, single plane intake manifold. The camshaft specs were somewhere in the article. Let me find that picture of the engine again. There it is. Here's the picture of the engine. It's got all the stuff. You could pause for it. But if you look, it's a hydraulic roller, 562, 580. It's actually 600 lifts because they used 1/6 rocker. Sorry, 248, 254, and 110. To the LS. What did they do? Well, they had to stroke it because this is 402. So they bored it a little bit and had to add a stroke because it didn't come that way from the factory. And yeah, hydraulic roller camshaft. They did use a carb just like they used with that. They used a Dart, which is not pictured here, but they actually had the flow sheets from the chart, but it's a Dart cathedral port head, 225. They have a CNC ported combustion chambers, same carburetor, blah, blah, blah. I bet you Richard Holder probably even has this because it looks like it's done at Western Tech. But anyway, they had to use 3 camshafts just to get to the same power as, or 2 camshafts to get to the same power as the small block Chevy. So here's camshaft 1 that they used, a 232, 234, 595 lift, 112. And then they had to use this one, 605, 609, 238, 240, 112. They had to use 2 because the first one, let me just show you. This camshaft without a spacer from the small block Chevy, 576. First one, 562. How is that possible? How is it that this camshaft from the superior LS made 10 less horsepower with the same compression ratio? And actually, it's a little smaller, about 4 cubic inches. Got to give it that. But how is this possible? Because it's superior. So they changed camshaft and they got 579, 578. So look, they beat it by 2, but we're just going to put it on a spacer on the small block Chevy. And we're now at 583. Well, let's put it on here. And they're at 583. You mean they made the same, but you had to use 2 camshafts to get there? No, sacre bleu. How's that possible? Now, yeah, it took less duration, which I can already tell you. And I can't wait for you keyboard warriors to start commenting. Well, if you put the same camshaft in that LS, then you made way more. Put that bigger duration, that you'll make more power. I'm going to tell you right now, the reason why I was on the dyno yesterday was to test that. Go ahead, type away. I can't wait for that one. That video will be way further on because yeah, I tested that. I'm gonna Heads up, no. But anyway, these are those, and that's how I got to thinking, LSs are good, but they're not superior. They're making great power. They got a 15-degree cylinder head. They should make really great power, and it should be superior. But this is 2007, so I was like, it's a good engine. But small block Chevys are still really good too. Evidently, they're about the same. Now I know you're like, well, they didn't use LS3 heads. You're right, they didn't. I did. Let's see how I did. Here are the specs on the small block Chevy. So the cylinder head's changed several different times because I've done more testing on the small block Chevy. But here's the general rundown. It actually used a dart block, but I got this one for a deal because it was blown up. Somebody kicked a rod out of this deal. So it was half filled with concrete, and it had 904 lifters. So anyway, so it's an aftermarket block, but it's a 11.3 compression ratio, but that varied. So the highest one it got was with the AFR 227 head was tested. It was 11.5-1. It had the same camshaft. I never changed camshaft in the small block Chevy. It had a duration of 260 on intake, 270 on exhaust, 680 lift, 108 lobe separation. That's a solid roller. And before you go saying, well, it's way bigger than the camshaft for the LS, hold that thought, because on Thursday, I'm going to put out another video comparing the two camshafts between a hydraulic roller and a solid roller. It's not what you think. That's not true. That's something you kids... That's a parroting comment. That's not true. The heads, I didn't use the AFR. I did use these AFR enforcers to begin with. They made about 570. In the end, the best power came with the AFR 227s, and it made 631. Now, the intake manifolds, it changed for everything. So the best manifold that was used was a Edelbrock 2970. That's one for Dominator. The best single plane was a 2892. And yeah, I tested both an 1000 CFM Demon carburetor and the 1050 Dominator carburetor as well. And that's the small block Chevy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm going to give out the dyno numbers in just a minute, but I did want to give you the specs on that. Let me show you the specs on the LS now. Go ahead. Here are the specs on the LS. Now, I know it's written on the paper. You can pre-order the actual dyno book. So once I get done testing all 6 sets of cylinder heads, which should be relatively soon, because I've only got 2 left to test, that's all going to be compiled in a book. It will also have multiple camshaft tests in it too, because I've tested, right now I'm on my 3rd camshaft. I've got at least 1 to go on the LS. So purchase the books, all that information will be neatly printed. This is just beginning the stages. But, and here's the basics. It's a cast iron 6.0 block. It's bored 30 over, and it has a forged rotating assembly, flat top pistons, and with the AFR Enforcer LS3s, which so far, this is not the best head I've tested so far. It's the best one you've seen in the video so far. Something else has beat it, which we'll get to later, but this one is by far, right now, at this point when you're watching this video, the best. The intake manifold was used as a Victor Jr., and it was used with a 1000 CFM Demon carburetor, and also tried the HVH adapter with a 1050 Dominator carb. Same thing I tried on the small block Chevy as well. I also tried a Super Victor manifold. I'll go ahead and warn you, it did not do better with this head. It did on a different set of heads, which I'll talk about later. But so far, the Super Victor has been worse on everything except for 1 set of heads. The camshaft that was used, I've tested 2. I've done a Truck Norris, and I've also done this Texas Speed camshaft. And I've also done a bigger one. That's why I say, before you call commenting and saying, well, that small block Chevy cam is so much larger than the LS, if you put that same big one in there, it would make more power. I would hold your comment until you see later testing in months, because I just got off the dyno yesterday, and that doesn't hold water. But this camshaft's a 229, 244. It's a hydraulic roller, 629, 615. 112 lobe separation. I do have to say this, so before you think I'm hating on the LSs, by far, if you're a small block Chevy guy and you're listening to this, The thing you're going to like the most about the LS's is its ease to use as far as working on stuff. The only thing that might be harder to change on an LS is actually changing the physical lifters, because you do have to remove the heads to do it. But camshaft changes are so much easier on an LS because you're able to spin those lifters over. They go up in the trays. You don't actually have to pull off the intake manifold to even do it. And guess what? Intake manifold changes are easy because there's no water that runs through it. The rockers themselves, this is by far the best thing and the quickest thing. On an LS, they're pedestal mount, which means once you tighten them down to 22 foot-pounds of torque, you're done. You don't have to, like on a small block Chevy, if you ran a hydraulic roller, we'd have to bring it down on the base circle, and then we'd tighten our poly lock until it, got 0, and then we'd have to go 3/4 return and tighten it. You don't even have to do that. You simply tighten it down to 22 foot-pounds because of the pedestal mount. As long as your push rod length's right, you're good. It's so much easier. So especially when we're changing cams, piece of cake. LS's on that, by far, you win there. You win on ease of working on it. Changing manifolds, I could change probably hundreds in an hour. Small block Chevys takes about 14 minutes because I have water that runs through it, and we have to redo the distributor. You don't have to worry about that with an LS. That is by far superior. So if you're talking about LS as being superior, don't talk about your block. You need to talk about your ease of use, your quickness of changing parts. Speaking of which, if you're an LS guy and you haven't already turned off this video, you've got a small an intake manifold you would like to see tested, I would love to test it because they're so easy to test. I've only tested 2 because that's all I had. They're really easy to test, and I don't mind doing it. But that's the specs for it. Now let's see how different the power is between the 2 engines. Before I show these results, if you are one of the people that like to watch a video and then comment down below where the dyno charts start in the video, like video starts at blah blah time, I will ban you, and this will be the last LS thing you ever see, which sucks for you because like I said, I've tested 2 more sets of cylinder heads from this one, and now another cam, and I've got 2 more heads to do, and yeah, a bunch of stuff. But anyway, here we have this. This is the best the small block Chevy ever did is in black with the 4150 carb. I got to point that out. Because right now, I know keyboard warriors like, ha! Look, the LS beat that small block Chevy. And then this with the AFR Enforcers, this was the best on the 4150. So this was, in this case, with the 4150 carburetor, this was the 2892. And I remember I never changed camshaft small block Chevy. It's the same one. It's always been in there. Again, this is that Texas Speed camshaft. And we did pull it to lower RPMs just for fun because we were trying to compare some of that Truck Norris camshaft, so we pulled it way lower. And yeah, the LS was up. And remember, this got a slightly less compression ratio than the small block Chevy. This is 11.1, and the small block Chevy in this form was 11.5. So it's a 0.4 difference. So yeah, that LS did make considerably more torque in this mid-range, which is great here, right? And it made, in case you're wondering what the difference is, that's 641, that was 638. So that's 3 horsepower. Kind of like that magazine article. But anyway, as far as torque, 560 from the LS, and we made 555. So it was 5. Really close. But before you're like, I told you LS is superior, I said this is the best with the 4150. And that's the best power. This right here that you see is the best power the LS made with these enforcer heads. I've done 2 more since then. Only one's beat it, but it's for a totally different reason. Now let's actually show you the best the small block Chevy actually ever did. This is the best on the 4150. This is the best the LS ever did, 4150 or 4500, because that was strange. You put a Dominator on the Dominator adapter on the LS, and I've tried it now 3 times with 3 different sets of heads. Every time it loses. So this is the best 4150. This is the best LS. That's the best with a 4150 on the small block. Here you go. This is actually the best now from the small block. So the Dominator, when you put a Dominator on the small block Chevy, it shines. And don't think I didn't try it, because this is the best LS with the Dominator. So this is with the Dominator on the LS because I tried it, but every time it loses. And this is the best with the small block with the Dominator. Looks like a small block Chevy for the win. In case you're wondering, it actually made way less power. It made like 631. So that's about
25 horsepower difference. And look at my torque, 573. So yeah, the small block Chevy is beating it there. But that's not really fair because remember, I told you the Dominator on the LS lost power. On the small block Chevy, it made power. Even though it's weird, isn't it? That's why we test. But we'll just compare it to the best here just to make it even. The best the LS did was with the 4150, and they made 560 torque. I made 574 with the small block Chevy. I know you're like, well, that's with the bigger cam. Then wouldn't you expect the torque to be better at the lower RPMs or something with the LS? Because it wasn't. And, you know, and by the way, I should point this out too. Yes, this is with the AFR and Forester LS3 heads. They outflowed the AFR 227 CNC heads. They outflowed them. So if you're talking about peak power, I would have expected it to be higher as well. 641 to a 657. It didn't do it. Now, as you're watching this, you're like, you piece of crap. You're just a small block Chevy fanboy. I wouldn't have spent last Thursday and Friday, or last Wednesday and Thursday, and yesterday on the dyno with just the LS if that was the case. I'm into information. I'm going to go ahead and tell you now that this number here is 656 with that small block Chevy. It has been bested by the LS engine. So I did change a different set of heads and finally got there. It wasn't the heads though. That's not, I mean, it's part of it, but you'll understand when I finally do that video. Or what you could do is you can, right now, in the link to the description, there is a link to my online store where you can buy the digital copies of all the dyno sheets from the last dyno session. So you get to see what heads I was actually talking about and the camshaft that was talked about. And you get to see why it did so well. So if you want all those dyno sheets, it'll cost you $30. You get them all texted to you. You're like, what's all tested in it? All right, since you asked, I dyno tested the ported 243 heads. That's a cathedral head. And I also dyno tested the ProMax small bore LS3 heads. I also tested the E85 on it as well. And I also tried a bigger camshaft. And if you would like to see those numbers now instead of waiting for me to put out a video finally for that, like I said, link will be in the description. Costs $30. You get all of them texted to you. And I think it's like, there's a lot of, you'll have like probably 16 dyno sheets will come to you. With some of them are graphs like this and some of the actual printouts. But it is helpful for you, I think. So, I know that several of you probably got upset with this video because you thought, I am just such a fanboy. And no, I don't care what engine is the best because both of you guys are fighting for second if you're doing an LS small block Chevy. Big block Chevy is the winner. You're fighting for second. Anyway, I love this stuff. I am extremely gifted and I'm lucky, I should say, that I get to do dyno testing and test all this stuff. It really is fun, very exhausting and expensive. Spend my fortune on it. But I'm lucky I get to do this. I am not about what engine is better. The only thing I even sounds like, because I don't like, when I'm talking about this video, it sounds like I don't like LS engines. That's not true. I don't like LS fanboys who parrot bad information constantly. So I've done a few of them. Their blocks are not that, I mean, yes, your blocks might be stronger. Most of you will never break a small block Chevy block, period. They are not superior in power. They are superior in ease of working on, for sure. You won that one, no doubt. But they're just, I hate that comment. That's probably the biggest one, that they're superior. Their heads flow so much better. That is true. They do flow more. They do flow more. Doesn't always mean you make more power. Sorry. Been on the flow bench a long time, doing this. You can make a head flow a lot of air. Sometimes you still ain't gonna make any more power. Just the way it works. But thanks for sticking with the video. Trust me when I say this, the stuff coming up on the small block and LS testing and even the big block testing, because by the way, for those that are not new to my channel, I have a big block 540 dyno mule. I just switched the heads yesterday and put the AFR 385s on. Let's see if we can't break 1,000 on that deal. Yeah, a lot of testing. And I also got my big block Chevy, the blower motor. That's probably actually the next one will be on the dyno. It's got a Roots 1071 supercharger we're gonna do, and that should be fun. That's not so much a dyno mule, that's actually going in the car. But, I mean, shoot, I test all the time. And don't get me wrong, there's probably 15 other things I want to test, because I'm also having another cam reground just for this LS that's in between what I just did yesterday and Texas Speed. because I want to try something else, see if I can't squeeze a little bit more out of it. I wish I'd tried a different camshaft with the small block Chevy, because no doubt I probably could make more there too. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I am no Superman. Don't be a parrot. I don't port cast iron heads. You guys take care.